Hello, this is Ronnie McBrayer. Thank you for finding my podcast. If you are burned out on religion, to quote Eugene Peterson's marvelous paraphrase, but faith is still important to you, or if you consider yourself a spiritual exile with no real place of belief to call home, then I have you especially in mind. I hope you'll stick around. Thanks again for listening.
It'll come as no surprise today, given the selection of music, that the scripture reading is about a river, the river that makes glad the people of God, the river that is a blessing to the world. This river is introduced and explained in the book of Ezekiel, Ezekiel 47, 1 through 12. This is a scene we as readers are joining in progress. Now, some of you will remember that phrase. Back when there were only 3 channels on your television and some breaking news would come over the airways and mess up what you were watching, and then after a little while, this pop-up screen would come up. We now join the following program already in progress. There is no DVR or live streaming, no rewind. Whatever you missed, you just missed it. Well, I'm not going to rewind 8 chapters today, but the book of Ezekiel contains exactly that, a long series of episodes. And these episodes arrive in the form of visions and dreams that Ezekiel has. Ezekiel 47 is a part of one of those dreams. This dream began way back in chapter 40. Ezekiel is transported to Jerusalem, the Jerusalem of the future, of restoration. And there is this bronze shining man who is his tour guide. It's an angel, I guess, an extraterrestrial, some mysterious being from the future. This bronze man would be much more at home in Star Wars, think CP3O, or an Isaac Asimov novel than in the Bible, I think. But regardless, the bronze man takes Ezekiel on this epic inspection of the city, spanning 8 chapters. And we now join the following program already in progress. At chapter 47, verses 1 through 12, and I'm reading from the Living Bible. Then he, the bronze man, brought me back to the door of the temple. I saw a stream flowing eastward from beneath the temple. Then he brought me outside the wall where I saw the stream flowing along. Measuring as he went, he took me 1,500 feet east along the stream and told me to go across. At that point, the water was up to my ankles. He measured off another 1,500 feet and told me to cross again. This time, the water was up to my knees. 1,500 feet after that, it was up to my waist. Another 1,500 feet, and it had become a river so deep I wouldn't be able to get across unless I were to swim. It was too deep to cross on foot. He told me to keep in mind what I had seen, then led me back along the bank. And now, to my surprise, many trees were growing on both sides of the river. He told me this river flows east through the desert and the Jordan Valley to the Dead Sea, where it will heal the salty waters and make them fresh and pure. Everything touching the water of this river shall live. Fish will abound in the Dead Sea, for its waters will be healed. Wherever this water flows, everything will live. Fishermen will stand along the shores of the Dead Sea, fishing all the way from En-Gedi to En-Eglaim. The shores will be filled with nets drying in the sun. Fish of every kind will fill the Dead Sea, just as they do the Mediterranean. All kinds of fruit trees will grow along the riverbanks. The leaves will never turn brown and fall, and there will always be fruit. There will be a new crop every month without fail, for they are watered by the river flowing from the temple. The fruit will be for food, and the leaves for medicine. The word of God for the people of God. Garrett, can we turn the stage air conditioning down? It's very cold. There are several types of literature genres within the Bible. Gospels, wisdom literature, history, poetry, psalm, song, and of course, there is the apocalyptic literature. In the New Testament, the book of Revelation is apocalyptic. John the writer tells his tales of sea monsters and plagues and seven-headed dragons and galloping horsemen, cosmic upheaval, falling stars. Sometimes when I've read the book of Revelation, it feels like I've been watching a Quentin Tarantino film fest for a while probably ingesting psychedelics. But Revelation is not the only example from the Christian Scriptures. Parts of the Gospels of Mark and Matthew, part of 2 Peter and Jude are also apocalyptic. In the Old Testament, we find the same thing. Daniel, Zechariah, portions of Isaiah and Amos, and the book from which we have read today, Ezekiel. All of these are apocalyptic in nature. It is a genre unique to Second Temple Judaism and early Christianity. All apocalyptic writings, Old or New Testament, have two major characteristics. First, these writings are almost always symbolic. Nothing is direct. Rarely is anything explicit. Everything is shrouded in mystery and nuance without clear explanation. Though some people make a very nice living explaining all the symbolism. The best-selling Christian books of the last several generations have been foolproof, ironclad, unquestionable decodings of the biblical apocalyptic writings. Or so say the authors of those books. I would note that over these generations that none of those books have come true. But ask those people and they will tell you that they have the answers. Better yet, buy their book, they would tell you they have the answers. I think they're selling more hype and hysteria than they are hope and clarity. And the second characteristic of all this apocalyptic writing is that it was written, all of these apocalyptic books were written during a time of extreme trouble and extreme suffering. The community originally receiving this literature was in crisis. So the writer writes to inspire faith in the readers, offering them hope that life will not always be as tough as it is right now. Telling them to keep the faith because God in His own time, in His own way, will intervene, bringing His victory and justice to bear in the world. Both of these characteristics, this mysterious symbolism and the appeal to hope and trust in God, are evident in this work by the prophet Ezekiel, evident in abundance. In fact, when it comes to the biblically mysterious, often the biblically bizarre, Ezekiel is without rival. Have any of you ever read the book of Ezekiel in whole? He has these strange visions of vast valleys full of skeletal remains that suddenly get up and walk and take up life again. He sees in his mind the final battle of the world, a war to end all wars that he calls the Battle of Gog and Magog. He envisions God speaking within this wheel within a wheel, a kaleidoscope of rainbows or something. And some have come to the conclusion that these visions are so over the top, so bizarre, that Ezekiel must be either mentally ill, suffering post-traumatic stress disorder, or he's had a close encounter with a UFO. Tim, where are you? But all of that aside, the Jewish people believed that God had actually spoken through these strange visions and these strange dreams. And they concluded that while they had not had that experience, that somehow there was substance to what Ezekiel was saying. God was trying to say something through this man. And so we come to him today looking and listening for God to speak. A little bit about Ezekiel. When he was a young man, he was preparing to become a priest at the Jewish temple. Think of him as a Bible college or a seminary student. And just at the moment he earns his degree, disaster strikes. A foreign power, Babylon, modern-day Iraq, invades Israel, slaughters its army, lays waste to the countryside, tears down and burns to the ground the temple of God, and deports all of its youngest and brightest citizens across the desert to Babylon. Ezekiel is one of those young, bright deportees. He is yanked away from home and family. His country is destroyed. He witnesses the tragic death of his young wife. His plan for a career vanishes before his eyes, and he spends the rest of his life in a foreign land having and recording these strange visions. What would it be like to be Ezekiel, having lived through such a horrifying experience? Well, I don't think we have to look very far. On October 7th, 2023, Hamas launched more than 4,000 rockets into southern Israel. 6,000 militants crossed the Gaza-Israeli border on foot, in military vehicles, by powered hang gliders. And some 1,200 Israelis and foreign nationalists were killed, mostly civilians. It was an act of savage terrorism, the bloodiest single day for Israelis since the end of the Holocaust in World War II. The violence was particularly grotesque at the Nova Musical Festival, 3 miles from the border. Slide, please, if you would. That festival was held out of doors on a holiday weekend. 4,000 people were in attendance, mostly teenagers and college students. A full third of that day's casualties occurred at the Nova Music Festival. And then adding to the horrors of that day, 251 people were taken hostage by Hamas and carried back into Gaza. 85 of those hostages were murdered while they were held in horrifying conditions. The remainder eventually made it back home, the last of which being released after more than 2 years in captivity. 2 years of torture, 2 years of abuse we cannot even imagine, 2 years of hell on earth for both them and their families. Now that is a contemporary, terrifying example of exactly what happened to Ezekiel. He is torn away from his home by violence. He is carried across the border to a hostile land. He endures and suffers unimaginable abuse, but not for a year, not for 2 years, 20 years. The man never gets back home and dies in that foreign land, all while writing down and circulating these visions that he's had and sharing these visions with others who have been displaced by the same violence that he had experienced. I don't think we should be surprised that Ezekiel's last vision, the one before us today, is that of this beautifully restored temple. Remember, what was his occupation? What was he training to become? A priest. His training and the plan for his life was to serve God and to serve people out of that temple, and now it was destroyed. And when Babylon destroyed that Jewish house of worship, it resulted in the worst possible crisis of faith that those people had ever had. This temple was where God had lived. This temple was a sign of God's presence and power. To be without a temple in a very real way for the Jewish people was to be without God. It would be like calling ourselves Christians, but knowing nothing of Jesus. Nothing would exist in our faith without Christ. You follow that? And without the temple, nothing really existed for the Jewish faith. So Ezekiel, seeing this future temple, a new house of God, was more hopeful than any of us can really understand. Ezekiel must have burned up the paper with his pen, writing it all down as quickly as he could after being shown such a sight. And I imagine he was filled with the joy that one day that temple would be rebuilt. Hope was going to be reborn. Faith in God would be resurrected. It would be like the disciples hearing about the resurrection of Jesus on Easter Sunday morning. It would have that same effect. But this temple, this house of worship, was different. This temple had a river in it. And water is pouring out from beneath the altar and out the doors of the building. And Ezekiel is told to go measure it. And at first, it's just up to his ankles. He goes a little further, it's up to his knees. Goes a little further, it's up to his waist. Goes a little further, it's over his head. And he has to swim. Let's think of a river closer to us and in our own time that does this exact thing. You ever heard of the Mississippi River? Do you know where the Mississippi River begins? Its headwaters are found in the frozen tundra of Minnesota. A trickle, just a trickle out of a small glacial lake called Lake Ithaca begins the mighty Mississippi. A drop of water coming out of that little lake takes 3 months to make it to the Gulf, covering more than 2,000 miles. And that's not the only drop of water. If you were to be hiking all the way over into western New York State and a drop of your sweat hits the ground, that drop will find its way to the Mississippi River and to the Gulf. If you drop your water bottle while camping in the Great Teton Mountains of Idaho, those droplets will find the Missouri, then the Mississippi, and then the Gulf. The Mississippi River Basin sustains with its water and commerce 50% of the American population. The center of this country would be a desert without it. But in Minnesota, a child can stand in it with the water only up to his or her ankles. And by the time it gets to Louisiana, it's 3 miles wide and 200 feet deep. Do you get the image that Ezekiel is beholding in this temple? The further this water goes, the longer this river flows, the deeper it becomes. It flows out of the temple into the desert and all the way down to the Dead Sea. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Dead Sea. It is the saltiest body of water in the world, 10 times more salty than our oceans. You can swim in the Dead Sea. I have a picture for you of some of our Simple Faith folks a few years ago. They're trying to swim. They're just sitting in the water, and the water holds them up because it's so thick with minerals and with salt. It is, I won't say it's impossible to drown, because I thought my own wife here on the far side of the picture was going to drown in 2 feet of water because she couldn't figure out, just sit down, hon, just sit down. The water's got you. Now, this river of Ezekiel says it's going to go all the way down to the Dead Sea and transform it. Those of you who've ever been in the Dead Sea, you can tell folks, what's in there? Nothing. It is a desert. There are no fish. There are no oysters. There is nothing in it because it is of such salt and toxicity. And then Ezekiel comes along, sees this vision, and says what God is going to do, God is going to do something so significant and so restoring that even the deadest place on the planet will be brought back to flourishing life. And that is the message. I'm not an interpreter of dreams, but I am convinced that Ezekiel's dream for the future is already in place. Not with the construction of some highly advanced cathedral for God with an artesian well inside of it, but with the construction of a people, of temples not made with human hands. God no longer lives in a Jewish temple. God doesn't live in any temple. God doesn't live in a Christian church. God doesn't live in any church. God hasn't been cornered by religion, not any religion. God instead has chosen to make his home within you and within me. We have within us God's Spirit and God's truth. We have inside of us Jesus' words to the woman at the well, springs of living water that will never go dry. The water flowing from the presence of God is the people of God sent out to refresh and resurrect a dead and a parched world. And it's so interesting to me that the further you get from the temple, the deeper the water becomes. You see, we think of it oppositely. Oh, I'm going down there to church on Sunday because that's what it's all about. This is not at all what it's all about. The church is simply a place that we get together, figure out that we're not by ourselves in all of this, maybe get a little motivation, maybe get a little bit of inspiration, but the real work where the water is needed is not inside here, it's out there. And a lot of churches and a lot of Christians spend all their time just going to the building, gathering in the building. And it is of no earthly good to a community if all churches do is pile up together. At all. The great Louis Palau said that the church is a lot like manure. Pile it up and it'll stink up the neighborhood. Spread it out, it will enrich the world. That's what this vision is here. To flow out of here each week and to go out into a world that needs life. Now here at Simple Faith, we've done some real good stuff over the years. We've given away hundreds of thousands of dollars to local, regional, and international charities. And I'm so happy to say with the ladies of Path of Grace here that we have been a longtime supporter of Path of Grace. We love y'all, and we're glad that you're here today. And we love John and Peggy and all the work that they have done. John Broussard. I bump into people all the time in this community, and they say, Path of Grace, I helped start that. I'm like, how many starters did y'all have? A bunch, because it's worthy, hard, difficult work. Amen? But we try to help, and we've helped some of the poorest of the poor in our own neighborhoods and around the world. We've responded to hundreds of weather disasters, personal crises, wars, serving the least of these. But all of that isn't that hard. Pay attention, write some checks, right? It's not all that hard. You know what's hard? For you to be water and life to the world every day where you live. That's the hard part. But that's where the difference is really made. All of us doing our part in our world. All of us carrying out our vocation right where we live. Everybody you meet these days thinks that something's wrong with the world and somebody ought to be changing it. Well, what about you? What about you? Because you can change your little part of the world. It's all any of us have. And you don't have to be perfect at it. You don't have to be the best at it. You don't have to have everything figured out and know all the answers to all the questions. Just love people. Serve people. Help people. Be kind to people. Be the river of life right where you live with your talents, your uniqueness, your personal vocation, and yes, with all of your frailties and failings and shortcomings. You don't have to be flawless. You just have to be you. The true, beautiful soul that God has made and God is making. Giving a little life out of the life that you have found for yourself. And you just pop up like a little oasis in the middle of a desert. I love an ancient story from India, and the story is probably as old as the words we have read today in Ezekiel. And I'll finish with this. There was a villager who every morning put a long stick across his back, and the stick had a water pot on each end. And the man would walk about a mile to the river to get fresh water for his family. But these two water pots were not the same. One was perfect, in pristine working condition, but the other one had some holes and it was a cracked pot, right? It was a cracked pot. And by the time the man got home with his water, the pot that was in perfect condition was always full, but the one that had the cracks and the holes in it, it had already lost half of its load on the walk back home. And the cracked pot was so ashamed. It just couldn't do the job it was intended to do, or at least the job was not done well. And so one morning the cracked pot spoke to its owner at the river and said, I am so sorry. I'm so embarrassed that I can't be better at carrying your water. I know you need it at home, and I'm just not very efficient. And the man, apparently unsurprised that a water pot was talking to him, answered and said, on our way home today, I want you to look at the path we are walking. And so the water pot did so. And on its side of the path, and only on that side of the path, there were rows and rows of beautiful flowers. And the man said, do you see all that? I've always known that you were a leaky vessel. And so I planted these flowers on your side of the path so that as that water escapes and leaks, it gives life to these flowers, and these flowers are enjoyed by everyone in the village. And that's what I'm talking about. Within each of us is the water of life. It is healing, it is giving, and the fact that you are a cracked pot only ensures that it gets out and waters the world. Wherever this water flows, everything will live, and that life is within you.